To that question, you can't do it under the condition of concision. You have to give some arguments and some evidence, and that's not very hard, actually. But, you know, it'll take a few minutes at least. And, you know, once you give the argument and the evidence, it's perfectly obvious, in fact. And, you know, whatever Gaddafi may be, he's just not in the same league, you know. And then we turn to other questions, like what we do about international terrorism. Okay, a different ballpark. But the point is, if you have the condition of concision, that just can't happen. Either you repeat some conventional thought that doesn't require any evidence or argument, or else you say something which does sound like it's from Neptune, you know, or wacko, because nobody heard it before, and they want to know what's your reason, and you can't give your reason. Now, every other country I know about, you can give your reasons. Not only can you get on radio and television, but you can talk for a while. You can explain what you meant, you know. You get 15 minutes or something. And it's just assumed that way. Now, the American media are different, and I think, I'm convinced some guys in the PR industry thought this up, because it's a terrific device. I mean, the media, like Nightline and the rest of them, they could let anybody on. In fact, in my view, if they were smarter, they'd let more dissidents on, because they'd all sound like they were from Neptune, you know. I mean, they would be saying these strange things and giving no reason for it, because there's no time to give reason, because you're cut off by the commercial or something. And like, here's some advice to anybody in the PR industry who may be around. I think that you ought to tell those guys they're really losing a big opportunity. They ought to let dissidents on under their structural conditions, and they'll sound wacko, you know, and then you've won a point. But, you know, that's something really important, I think. And so I'm not enthusiastic. I'm in a case, you know, like Fair did a study of people on Nightline, and it was an interesting study, and it showed, you know, you can guess. A couple of days after that, I actually got an invitation to be on, no doubt by accident. It happened I was going to be in Wyoming or something, couldn't do it. But, you know, frankly, I wasn't all that eager. I mean, I don't think there's much you can say in 3 sentences, you know, that makes any sense. Maybe it's worth saying something just for your friends out there who can figure out what you're talking about, but they probably don't need it, you know. So I think there's a deeper problem. You know, I think there's a real deeper structural problem about the media.
Yes, Professor Chomsky, when I was reading your book, Manufacture of Consent, it was very eye-opening in terms of the argument you made around the Vietnam War, and that we were here was always a problem of tactics, but never one of the moral question about another country invading another one. What struck me is that even though I thought that to myself, when reading the media, I did not feel that they had to think that. So it never occurred to me to question them on that. And then the other thing that I thought of that was closer to home was a few weeks ago, Ortega started, I guess, releasing the National Guard, and they were locked up. And it was pointed out in places like the Post, this would be a test of whether or not he's really serious about peace. The thing, the parallel that I had that people like yourself and other people I wrote about is a parallel that's pointed out about Hoover's COINTELPRO operation, where they admit that Hoover had illegal operations against groups that were not breaking the law. What's important about that is the fact that they never suggest that those people still remaining locked up, people like Geronimo Pratt, should be released, and I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, that second thing is interesting, and that's the kind of thing you read in the World Peace Council literature. See, when you read the Communist Party literature, they say that, and they're right, you know. I mean, they talk about human rights abuses in the United States. In fact, it should go beyond that. I mean, it's not just a matter of releasing people who were illegally imprisoned. It's also a matter of prosecuting people who carried out crimes. COINTELPRO was a crime. It involved real criminal activities, like it involved things like Gestapo-style assassination. That's a crime. The murder of Fred Hampton, that was a major crime, and that's part of the COINTELPRO operation. And you ought to get after the people who are responsible for it, and there's a lot more like it. So there's plenty to do there, and I think people ought to press for that. That's important. As to the Vietnam thing, your reaction is extremely interesting, because, you know, it's a very striking fact that most people react the way you do, thinking, look, it's not a matter of tactics, it's just morally wrong. In fact, that shows up in the polls. Very striking. As late as after all the propaganda, you know, the tons of propaganda, and nobody saying anything else to the public, as late as the 1980s, about 70% of the population on the Gallup polls, when asked what was the Vietnam War about, say it was, here's the wording, fundamentally wrong and immoral, not a mistake. That's, last I saw, about 72% of the population. Now, nobody ever says that, you know. Find somebody who says it was anything worse than a mistake. You won't find them. But that's what everybody thinks, alone, you know. Everybody sitting alone in front of a tube thinks what you thought. And the genius of American democracy is to make sure that everybody's sitting there alone in front of the tube thinking, I must be off the wall because I'm the only person who thinks this. In fact, everybody thinks it, or an awful lot think it, even without anybody saying it. Incidentally, those same polls show that among what they call opinion leaders, now that's a mixed group, like it includes clergy and businessmen and others, very non-homogeneous group. But among opinion leaders, the number of people who think that is about 40%, not 70%. And among elite intellectuals, it's virtually zero. We know that from other sources. In fact, it was virtually zero right at the peak of anti-war protests around 1970. We know that from good evidence. But these stupid and ignorant masses are somehow capable of seeing that when you carry out aggression, it's aggression. You have to be really smart to see that aggression is defense. That takes intelligence and training. So you got to work on that one. But the genius of American democracy, I think, has been to atomize people. So whatever you think when you're sitting in front of a boob tube, you also think you're off the wall, you know, because you never hear it, and you don't have any contact with anybody else, because that's the brilliance of eliminating organizations. Like, you know, there's no labor unions, there's no political clubs, there's no, you know, about all